Hi, Loretta. How are you? We can't hear you.
How about now?
Now we can hear you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, Loretta. How are you? Oh.
Well, how are you?
All right. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. We already are live streaming on YouTube, and we already have a couple people watching. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to our South Carolina NATS Fall 2022 workshop. Yay. We're thrilled to see everybody. Our focus this fall will be on some of our newest categories to the auditions, and that are the categories of our children and youth. We have several teachers in our chapter who have been teaching this population of students for a long time. And so I know that many of them have expressed how thrilled they are that we are really dedicating some time to this topic. We're always happy to showcase our South Carolina members as well as members of the Mid-Atlantic. And today we are joined by two members of our sister chapter of North Carolina NATS, Margaret Fontaveros and Chelsea Knapp, both of whom are private teachers, have thriving private studios in North Carolina, and they're going to share a little bit with us about their experiences working with children and youth and the adjudication of these populations, the benefits of the adjudication, and how you can best serve this population of singers in your comments. It's not going to be a super long presentation today, 20-25 minutes, maybe a little longer, and then we're going to have a little informal Q&A. So please, if you would, jot down your questions as you go, or drop them in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat as well. And we'll enjoy a beverage together and a little bit of fellowship as we talk about this at the end. But in the meantime, let me please welcome our guests, Margaret Fontaveros and Chelsea Knapp.
Would you like me to go ahead and start?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, okay. Serena, thank you so much for inviting Chelsea and myself to share our experience with working with children and youth singers. We're just going to be covering some common questions that come up when thinking about this younger age group in the NATS auditions. So, some questions. First, why? Why do teachers sign children and youth up to audition? What's really helpful for you to share as an adjudicator? What happens in a typical lesson? What about the boys, the ones dealing with changing voices? And what should you write on the adjudication form? So the first question, why? Why do children and youth sign up for NATS auditions? I think it's important to know the answer to this question because it's different than the answer to why a high school or college age student would sign up for NATS auditions. Having a good understanding of the why would then guide your comments to be the most helpful to our young singers. But let's return to that question in a minute. And first, let's answer the question, what's helpful? We have chosen the profession of teaching because we enjoy helping others. We are voice teachers specifically because we like helping others become better musicians, better performers, and we enjoy sharing with them all the things we've come to love about making music. Much like physicians, we ascribe to the motto of do no harm, and it's always with our best intentions that we give advice and share our own experiences and knowledge about singing, because we want to help. So the question is, what is most helpful to address with our young singers in that short little window of time you have with them during the audition? Let's use an analogy to put some things into perspective. Think about a baby just learning to walk. Super cute, right? Those first steps are always so exciting because we know this is something the baby's never done before. And when they do stand up and first try to move, it's usually only 1 or 2 steps and then they fall down again. And we know it will take many more attempts and lots of falling before the baby can walk a good distance. And even then, the walking is unstable and a little funny looking at first. We also know that it takes another several months to a year before that baby can run without falling down. And after that, it takes dedicated training if the child wants to use their feet for skilled physical movements like dancing or swimming or karate. And this is just the process of learning a new physical skill. Lots of repetition and lots of time. And it would be insane to expect a baby to be able to do something as skilled as dance the samba after only learning to take their first steps a few days prior, right? Now, let's think about the parents of this baby. With those first steps, most parents are rushing to capture the moment with their cameras, and the whole experience is one of joy and celebration. As the child continues to practice walking, the parents are cheering them on and sharing tons of encouraging words and exclamations. Parents instinctively know that there is no point in trying to correct their child's wobble and instability with direct instruction that the baby wouldn't understand, like, be sure to put your heel down first, not your toe, or use your core support to help your balance. They know that time, repetition, trial and error will eventually get their baby walking with confidence and grace, and the best thing they can do to help right now is to simply give them the opportunity to practice and be their greatest cheerleader. I now implore you to compare the baby to our young voice students. For many of them, this is not only their first time performing for an adjudicated event, but one of their first few performances ever. They're babies in the world of voice, and what they need most from us right now is pure encouragement. Now, you may be thinking that this isn't the case for all the singers in the children and youth categories, and that's true. There are kids who enter SCNATS with several years of voice lessons already under their belts or experience in community theater or church or school choirs. But we have to remember that this isn't about comparing one singer to another, and young singers with a lot of experience are kind of the exception, not the norm. So back to the why. Why do teachers enter youth into SCNATS auditions? So it's not really about second opinions on breath management and tone color. At this stage, it's more about the opportunity to perform. Simply to be able to get up in front of others and see what it feels like to perform. The more opportunities, the better. And some teachers only offer a spring recital, so this serves a need for getting more experience on stage. Another reason would be setting a dedicated goal and having a deadline to completely learn a few songs. Learning the process, what goes into preparing to perform something solidly from memory. And of course, an encouragement to keep singing and pursuing this beautiful art form. We don't want to squash their desire to keep learning and growing, and a comment or two of encouragement is much more motivating than a list of all the things that they need to fix. So, what happens in a typical lesson? I believe high school through adult students tend to concentrate on specific technical goals and spend a good amount of time in lessons with intent focus on skills they're developing, but for children and youth, most often the main goal is fun. Young students sign up for lessons usually because they have found pleasure and joy in listening to music and typically just love to sing along with songs they hear on the radio or TV shows or movies. And they choose voice lessons over soccer or gymnastics because it seems like it would be fun to do more singing. So it's not that we ignore teaching skills and techniques, but we perhaps take the long road to work on these goals because we don't want to turn them off from an art form we know is so rewarding. In an effort to fan the flames of happy feelings they get surrounding singing, We approach our goals in an exploratory fashion and often employ games and silly exercises to make learning not feel so much like work. So beginning voice students may have learned a few basic things about music from their teachers at school, or if they're lucky, they have a year or two experience with piano lessons. But for the most part, they are illiterate in music notation. And I personally feel a responsibility to include music literacy in lessons because part of being a strong musician includes being able to read music and converse intelligently with other musicians about a particular score. So for me, a typical 45-minute lesson with, say, a beginning 8-year-old would look like this. We would spend about 2 to 5 minutes at the start of the lesson doing warm-ups and stretching. I have different fun chants I use for this, or we play a copycat game to find the body alignment. Then 5 to 10 minutes of vocal exploration and warming up the voice more. So we'll do things like fun siren sounds, taking your voice on a roller coaster ride, imitating things like cats meowing and weed whacker, just exploring all the wonderful things our voices can do, which leads sort of indirectly into technique. Another 10 to 15 minutes of ear training and literacy work. So I was trained in the Kodai method, so I like to use folk songs to introduce and practice reading, writing, creating melodic and rhythmic concepts. And then we get to song work. So that's about 15 to 20 minutes. And this includes quite a bit of different things, right? They're beginner students. So we end up teaching them melody by rote, having to explain vocabulary. There's a lot of words they may have not come across yet that come in the songs, helping them memorize. And then, of course, working on things like dictation, and tone quality and breath management. And one of the big ones is don't breathe in the middle of a word. And then all things with stage presence, like connecting to the lyrics and facial expressions, what to do with their hands, how to stand, when to move, things that you do with all ages. But at this stage, because it's new, it takes more time, repetition, and reminding. And I would like, but I don't expect my students to do all of these things well on the first try. So notice that only 1/3 of the lesson is spent on song work. And if I have a student entering SCNATS, I will cut out the ear training and literacy work so we have more time to make sure they're prepared to perform. However, there's still a lot of time just spent on the basic things like simply learning what pitches to sing, when typically teenagers and adults can take care of that kind of work on their own time. Also, I think it's good to consider the timeline when getting ready for the musical theater auditions in the fall. My own studio follows a public school calendar, so students take a break from lessons during the summer and then will resume during the last week of August. And the South Carolina SCNATS fall auditions are October 22nd, and then I heard that you actually had to submit your videos a week or two prior to that. So that would only be 7 or 8 lessons with me before the student would need to be performance ready. And for a student to be truly prepared, then they would need to do a lot of that work on their own at home between lessons, which doesn't always happen, or select songs that they already have a good amount of familiarity with. So there's a lot to contend with to get ready for these auditions. Now I'm going to turn it over to Chelsea to talk about the changing voices, and that's another fun thing to contend with.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to give a few additional notes pertaining to the youth TBB category. This category mostly contains 6th to 8th grade boys. And as you know, the vocal transition that can happen between 6th and 8th grade can be really extreme. So in that one category, you'll have anywhere from like a boy soprano down to like a fully formed baritone. And what I want to talk about are the the boys that are currently in between that, which most of them will be, they're right in the thick of their voice change. I just want you to imagine assigning a seventh grade boy his 3 pieces in the end of August, and then fast forward to October, and his voice no longer fits most of those, probably 2.5 out of 3 of the songs. His voice may have dropped like an entire like half an octave by this time. We've already submitted the NATS forms. It's too late to change the pieces. And so in this case, the reason I wanted to talk about this was because commenting on saying that the song isn't fully in your range, maybe pick another piece, for this particular category isn't very helpful, since I'm sure that the teacher and the student are probably aware that 2 months ago, the song worked really, really well. And then in August, it's not working quite as well in their voice. They're like right in the change. So talking about like the range and being like, oh, maybe pick a song that's better in your range in this particular category isn't super helpful in the comments. And when they are able to move on to regionals, a lot of times you can sub in a song that will fit a little better, hopefully by that time. So the next thing I want to talk about for the TBB category are voice cracks. And transitioning students have them all the time. They're inevitable. They can't control them. And though some students have completely accepted them and even think they're funny, I have one student who considers them like hiccups and laughs whenever it happens. Some students are completely mortified by them. And since we don't personally, usually we don't personally know any of the students in the category we're judging, it's best to not mention the voice cracks, even if it's well-meaning, even if it's like, oh, it's okay, voice cracks happen. Like some students are just completely mortified by the fact that a voice crack did happen. So just avoiding comments on the voice crack is best. So try to comment on only things that they can control. So the breathing, posture, diction, characterization, everything that's heavily worked on, that even with the voice cracks happening and the voice changes, we can still tell if they're having like shallow breath or if you can't understand them. So keep it to comments that they can absolutely control, and make sure to keep it very positive, because especially at this age, this is a critical time in like the middle school age where we want kids to still love singing. We want them to continue, especially these like middle school boys going into high school, because the musical theater teachers and our choir teachers are definitely going to thank us if we can keep them enjoying singing. So now we're going to move on to an example of a TTB youth submission, just to kind of get our heads thinking of what we would want to write. So feel free to kind of jot down. We're going to watch a quick video of an example of a boy. At this point, he was in 7th grade. And just a note there, we did get consent from the parent and the student for these videos. And feel free to just kind of write down a few things that you would say as a comment for this particular student. So let's go ahead and, yes, thank you so much.
Big day, first case, girl's gone, no trace, small town, no crime, now tree gaps hit the big time. What's this? Fresh tracks, who's there? Relax, footprints, size 9, a clue, yahoo! Nope, those are mine. No dirty deed goes exactly as planned. Look, that's what it says in my deputy handbook. Even the best crook leaves you a clue. Big day, first case, girl's gone, no trace, you go. You know what to do.
Okay, so that is a clip that you would see last year. It was virtual, so that was a virtual example. But that is an example of a boy that you would most likely see in your TBB category. So now let's look at what a few teachers did write as a comment. So for this first comment, she wrote, I really enjoy your commitment to the character, particularly how you show your disappointment when you sing, nope, those are mine. I laughed out loud. I also appreciate how you're finding the different intentions behind each phrase and trying to express the array of feelings Hugo experiences on his first case. Now, it would be great if you can just make everything bigger and larger than life. The people in the back row of the massive auditorium want to see and feel your feelings too. For example, can you find more energy to express your excitement with the Yahoo? Great work on the preparation of this song and a very good start with diction. Keep working with your teacher to find ways to make all of the words clear. Thank you so much for singing for us today and keep up the great work. So the reason this comment is so great is it starts by pointing out a specific detail that the student did well, and it remained positive through the whole thing. So even though they were giving feedback, it was still completely positive. They were never like, oh, this is bad. And so giving the specifics is really nice. They complimented the diction, and they also did a nice job of mentioning how the diction was great, but could also be improved, which is a great practice to like reassure the kids that they're heading in the right direction, to be like, oh, it's really good, but here you could go a little further. And finally, the main notes are about energy and characterization, which are both very attainable achievements for kids to know that they need to maybe work on their character a little bit more. So that this comment is a great example. We have one more comment for the same video, which thank you so much. And so this is from a different teacher, just to give kind of a different voice for, but also a similarly great comment. So this one says, nice forward resonance and contemporary musical theater sound. It's so tough to keep the line or phrase going with that many rests. So very good job on that. Commit to the Yahoo. I know it can feel silly, but if you lean into the silliness, it'll actually feel more natural. Work to make all the lyrics more clear. I can occasionally not understand all the words, and it's tough because this is a super wordy song. Really enjoy this for you. And so similar to the previous comment, the teacher points out a specific technical aspect that went well. So starting with something very specific and positive, and then continued to comment on diction and character commitment. And notice how both comments also started, they kind of bookended. So you had a positive and then what could be worked on, and then ended with something like, thank you for singing, really enjoyed this for you. So the kids really get to see, because a lot of kids end up reading these comments themselves. And so it's good to like start and end on a high note. So now that we've looked at the TTB category, we're going to look at an example of a youth treble category. So this particular student is a 7th grade female in the youth treble. And so we'll watch this. Again, feel free to like write down some notes that you feel that you would personally comment.
If we are traveling at almost the speed of light, and we're holding a light, that light would still travel away from us at the full speed of light, which seems right in a way. But I'm trying to say, I'm not sure, but I wonder if inside my head I'm not just a bit different from some of my friends. These answers that come into my mind unbidden, these stories delivered to me fully written. And when everyone shouts like they seem to like shouting, the noise in my head is incredibly loud, and I just wish they'd stop. My dad and my mom and the telly and the stories would stop just for once. And I'm sorry I'm not quite explaining it right, but this noise becomes anger, and the anger is light, and this burning inside me would usually fade, but it isn't today. And the heat and the shouting, and my heart is pounding, and my eyes are burning, and suddenly everything is.
So for this category, we similarly have 2 comments. The first one is, wow, you have such a beautiful, mature tone color. It's really cool right now and so exciting to imagine how fabulous you will sound in another few years when you're even older. This is a super tricky song to get all those words in on time, and you're off to a wonderful start. I can understand every word. Great job with diction. Keep working with your teacher to find ways to make it sound anxious, like we need for the character, without making it sound like you're running out of breath and need to take so many breath breaks. I really enjoyed watching and listening to your performance today. Keep up the great work. And so this is another one. It does a good job of reassuring the student that they're heading in the right direction, and that what they're doing, they're like, it's a great tone color, but it's going to be like, we can't wait to see what you keep doing with it. And it's great to reassure kids with that, because sometimes they're like, oh, I don't know how I'm sounding right now. And so it's nice to know that for them to know that they're heading in the right direction. And then it goes into pointing out the need to keep the character work without affecting the technique, which is something I know a lot of kids really struggle with. They'll like get the technique down, and then the second they go into character, they get really excited, and then all of the technique goes out the window. So it's great to kind of remind students sometimes that we need to have a nice balance of both. So let's look at the second comment, which is a slightly different approach. It says, really nice job with building those long phrases and using understandable diction. When something is this pattery, that can really be a challenge. Try and let the hands relax by your side and use them when you want, as opposed to keeping them lifted and in singer mode. I appreciate the intensity you're giving your Matilda. I think it's a great character choice, but be careful on leaving your eyes fixed right above the camera. It looks like you're staring because you need to remember the words. You can relax and look around a little bit more, as we naturally do as people. Keep working on letting the tension go in your sound. I know with as fast as the words are, it can feel like we have to hold on to them. Just feel like they're flowing out in a stream of water, like from a water gun. Lovely work. So this is a nice comment. It takes a slightly different approach. She's pointing out movements that are out of place, specific ones like what to do with the hands and the eyes getting stuck in singer mode. I know we all kind of tell our students to focus the eyes to the back of the room, and it's nice to kind of remind them that they don't have to stay there at all times. And it also gives a suggestion using a recognizable analogy. So when the kids are reading this, they're like, oh, like a stream of water, water gun, to kind of help them understand fully the comment that this teacher is given. And that's always really helpful to give like a specific analogy in your comments. So the final category we're going to be looking at is a submission in the children's category. Yes, and we'll listen to that.
Mother said straight ahead, not to delay or be misled. I should have heeded her advice, but he seemed so nice. And he showed me things, many beautiful things that I hadn't known before. He reviewed my past, so I never had dared. I had been so careful, I never had cared. And he made me feel excited, well, excited and scared.
Okay, perfect. So for the comment, we have, wow, you're doing such a fabulous job portraying Little Red Riding Hood, and your preparation of the song is very solid. The nervous and anxious feelings really come across with your facial expressions and gestures. I also like the pacing back and forth, but wonder if you can find moments to hold your stance in one place so the pacing can be used more strategically to highlight specific moments of stress. Great job on using a speech-like tone, perfect for this song. Keep working with your teacher to fine-tune the little things. Like when you sing the word nice, try to hold the first vowel sound longer and making the second vowel sound super short. It was so fun to hear and watch you sing today. Keep up the great work you're doing with your teacher. Sorry. So in this comment, normally sometimes mentioning a lyric flub can be tricky, but in this one it's appropriate. Oh, I'm reading the wrong thing. I'm sorry. So commenting on the intention of movement is great because kids always like to see that they're doing a good job acting, and they get really excited to know that people are noticing that they are acting just like Little Red Riding Hood or just like Nemo, whichever song they're working on. But also knowing that acting doesn't mean just jumping up and down and moving side to side. So it was a really helpful comment. The teacher mentioned singing on the vowel, which is another very attainable idea for that age group. that they can work on. And this one remained positive throughout. And you'll notice the wording is a little more basic for this slightly younger category than it was for the youth category. So look at the last comment for the children's category. It says, good understanding of the character and their journey, nice energy throughout the phrases, good job continuing on after the lyric flub. These things do happen. Work on standing still so that you feel more secure in your sound and so that the audience can see all the great things you're doing. So in this one, she mentions the lyric flub, but she does it in a way that's saying, that's praising the student instead of just pointing it out. So that's a time when mentioning like a lyric flub, a melody flub would be appropriate if you're like, you kept going, that's wonderful, you made it all the way through the song, you didn't stop, and you didn't let it bother you. So that's a good time when the lyric flub mentioning is okay. And then this teacher did a good job of naming just one specific note, because sometimes when the kids read it, if you give them like 7 notes, it'll just all go away and they won't retain any of them. So they said, just make sure you're like more secure in your sound. And standing still. And so someone who's like 9 or 8 can understand, okay, I have to stand still, and can really work on that for the next, if they go off to regionals, to work on standing still for this song. And before we move on to the next slide, I just wanted to reiterate that a lot of the children and youth categories are focusing on the basics. And even if a student seems mature or more advanced in their vocal technique, we still want to give them comments that are appropriate to the age level. Because sometimes you'll get an 8th grader who maybe looks like a 12th grader, sings like a 12th grader, but we have to remember that they are in 8th grade and should still be commented on in the same way. Okay, so now that we have looked at some comments, let's give them a score. So looking at the SCNATS rubric, based on this SCNATS rubric, a developing student would get 70 to 79, an advancing student would score an 80 to an 89, and an accomplished student would score a 90 to 100. However, this rubric is more focused for the college and high school and graduate and adult categories. We still want to use the rubric, but we need to kind of adjust the scores a little bit for this age group. Normally anything less than an 85 will kind of be really devastating for a child, especially if they go to school and they get scores 85 and below. They kind of think of school in that way, and they're worried they're getting like a C or a B or a letter grade. So really they don't need to get anything less than an 85. So we're going to change the developing to be more 85 to 89. So this is reserved for the kids who feel maybe need like another year of lessons to develop their technique and confidence before moving on to regionals. And they don't really need a lower score to reflect this, even if they fully stop or get nervous. We don't need to give them anything lower than an 84, 85, because they'll know by the score that they weren't quite ready for regionals. They don't need anything lower. So this would make an advancing score about a 90 to a 94, maybe 95. And most students in these categories would fit into that advancing category. So these are the kids that you feel like maybe even if they had a few flubs in states, you could see them being that they'd be ready by March or by the regionals. So we want to fit, if you feel like they can make it to regionals and they would do great, give them their chance. Because we want to see a good turnout at regionals, right? So we want to make sure we have good numbers, good representation, and that all the kids that you feel like could potentially be ready by March are there. And then an accomplished score for this would be an 95 to 100. And then these are the kids that were fully prepared at state level, are showing their technical proficiency. And my last note about this is, I know a lot of people feel like they need to give them like a lower score because the student needs room to grow. But if you really feel like a student did great and think they should get first, if they, and you feel like they deserve a 99, give them a 99, because in this category, we want them to all be very excited to go on to the next level. So give them the score like you feel like they deserve in this. And so finally, we have compiled a few resources that we both like to use when teaching younger students. And Serena will be putting this in the link, the PDF file, and it will also be attached to the future streaming email that will be sent out. And this concludes our presentation. So thank you.
Thank you guys so much. I feel much better informed about how to adjudicate this category for sure, and what is really an appropriate way to really put something in comments and still address the things that we need to address without discouraging the students. I did put the SCNATS presentation PDF of the resources into the chat, and I'll be sending that out along with the link of the live stream for those who aren't able to be with us today. But at this time, I thought I'd open the floor to some questions, and I'll kind of moderate that. I didn't actually introduce myself at the beginning. For those of you who don't know, my name is Serena Hill LaRoche, and I'm the president of South Carolina SCNATS. And again, we are joined by Margaret Fontaveros and Chelsea Knapp, who are private teachers in the North Carolina district. So I do have one question that came in a few minutes ago. And they wanted to know if your background's a little bit, have you always wanted to work with children and youth? I guess, how did you come to work with this population of students?
Okay, I'll go first. I actually always wanted to work with children. My bachelor's degree is in music education, and during that program, you have to do training in both elementary school and high school, and I just loved the elementary school experience so much more. I love working with the little ones and at the start and getting them off to, feeling like you get to start from the beginning, from scratch with them, and help build and grow what they can develop into. So I just find it fascinating, and I love the reward I get back after seeing them learn something. So I don't know, I love kids.
So I also have a music education background, and I always wanted to teach in a middle school classroom, actually. So I've always loved middle school. And then when I was teaching lessons, I started getting siblings, and it was going younger and younger, and I realized how wonderful they are. And now it helps. I have a 6-year-old, so I have a reference in my own house. And it's so wonderful to see. They get so excited over singing, and so you really get to see the joy of like the kids growing up and like learning and really experiencing the love of singing. So yeah, I started in middle and then went down and down and down. And now I teach down to like 7 and up. And I just add every once in a while a 6-year-old, and I love it so much. It's so fun.
We have a question in the chat from Loretta Haskell. Hi, Loretta. Does anyone else feel that having the children introduce their song in the video submissions and including the title, show, and composer can be challenging? Loretta, do you want to add to your question?
I had that happen this week as we were preparing the submissions for the children's category, and I hadn't really thought about it, but to have a little 8-year-old introduce the song, sometimes in a difficult language, including the composer and the title. It's challenging for the teens to do it, and it's the youth can generally do it, but the children, I think, have an especially challenging time. And I think maybe that's something that we might want to look at going forward as we start including the child category in the national auditions. So
yes, and we're actually going to be talking about that in our district and in the region at large, that the national office, the NSA, are adopting the children and youth categories beginning the 2023-2024 academic year. So that's very exciting. But Margaret, do you want to jump in and address what Loretta says? Are you finding that in your own teaching as well?
Yes, it's one more thing that they need to practice and sort of drill and repeat from rote how to say and pronounce and memorize. But I think it's a good thing for them to do. It's already exposing them to the idea of what a composer is. You know, oh wait, actually somebody wrote this, and it could lead into a conversation of, you know, talking about other composers, and knowing their song title is important. You get asked all the time, you know, what have you done? What have you done? So already starting that habit of keeping track in their own head of what they know. I think it's good for them, good practice. So a tip, I guess, would be start from day one, like using the name of the song with them, using the composer's name with them, you know, hey, pull out your Bach piece or whatever they're singing. So you're interchanging those things and they relate it to the song, and have them say it back to you. Which song do you want to start with? And they need to tell you the title or the composer. So I think it's good.
We just had another question come in. How much do you find that the students pay attention to the scores, and how do the scores tend to affect their vocal self-image?
I'll take that one. Yes, okay. I have had students never want to do NATS again, ever, if they get anything less than an 85. So I think they put a lot of, and I've had students take breaks from lessons afterwards and kind of need to like reevaluate whether they want to sing anymore or not. So I would say that they take it very seriously, because the scores look similar to what they get on tests at school. And so if they see they got an 85 and they're a family that's like, we only do A's or above, they'll take it very hard. Can
I do a follow-up with that?
Yeah.
Do you find that some parents opt for the comments only? Because we do offer comments only in the NSA, at least at the district level. Is that something that you find people opt for if given the opportunity?
Not normally, because you find that parents are competitive, and more so sometimes, and so they want to know how their kids are ranking and what their scores are, but they also will take it kind of too far sometimes, and they'll be like, oh, you didn't get a 90, you're not good enough, which is silly and crazy. But yeah, I will say that the scores are kind of the worst part in some ways about the children's and youth category. So
thank you. We had a question that was emailed a little while ago, and they said, for the longest time, the prevailing wisdom was not really to train these young people. I guess, what would you say to teachers who don't teach this population of students and don't understand why that prevailing wisdom has now shifted? No?
Okay, sorry. I find that's a tricky question to answer, because I actually was taught that same thing. Growing up, my mother is also a voice teacher, and I didn't start taking lessons until I was 16 because, well, you're a child, you should just be in choir, and choir will be enough. And she didn't see the value in paying for lessons until I was mature enough. But myself, working with children, I see the value in it, and I don't know. I mean, there's ways to go about it. You have to approach it differently. Obviously, it's not going to be the same kind of lesson an 8-year-old gets that you would give a 16-year-old. You have to find ways to approach it differently. But I think there's a lot of value in it, and you can learn bad habits in choir that in a private lesson you wouldn't. You would get that one-on-one attention that would steer you in the right direction and prevent you from, like, I had a student last year, she graduated now, but she had vocal nodules for 2 years, and it was from her experiences at school. And then she started taking lessons with me, and we had to work through that and around that. And maybe if she had started when she was 8 or 9 with me, I've been teaching her healthier ways of using her voice during even just day-to-day stuff. She did a lot of yelling, and I don't know. I think.
Loretta, you have something you want to say?
Yes, I'd like to add that vocal science has come so far since many of us were trained. I was taught not to teach anyone until they were 16 years old in my training. And then I have been very active in SCNATS for many years, and the shift was coming, I would say, back in the late 1990s. And we also have some wonderful literature that's appropriate for children to sing. And at the same time, there has been such an increase in shows like The Voice, and shows where children are being asked to sing, and many times inappropriately. So the role of having a healthy voice teacher who can really guide a child who wants to sing and is aspiring to do it has become more and more important. And so I think there's just been a social shift in the need and the resources to help children, whereas before that did not exist.
Yeah, that's very well said. I would agree with that wholly. And you want the experiences that these students do have to be positive and to be healthy. And I will add, just to have that time to dedicate to themselves and then themselves only, because singing is such a personal thing. Yes, they can get some good training in choir if they have a good choir director. But communal singing is different. It is a different environment, and to have that personal time and someone really see you as the individual and working with you, I would imagine that there's would be real value in that as well. So yes. We had another question come through email, and I put it over here. Oh, it was about voices. Do you find that boys in voice lessons that they find voice lessons stabilizing when they're going through voice changes and confidence building? Can you speak to that in your studios?
Yes, I will say I've had a few students from pre to through all of it. And the biggest thing that it helps them with is they're keeping their falsetto strong, actually. So while everything else is kind of plummeting through, they have this one part of their voice that they can really rely on. I actually have a student coming up in SCNATS. We have two. We're using his newer voice, and then we have one song we're like, we're going to keep this just in case everything else goes wrong. You have this one song that you can rely on. I think that's the main thing, is that because sometimes they get to the point where everything feels really rocky. And if they can have that like one part of their voice they're really feeling good about, then they're happy to sing there for a little bit until everything else kind of evens itself out. So I think that's the main thing I found, is keeping that while this is happening. So.
We had several people email say that they couldn't be with us tonight, but sent along their comments and questions and things. And one came in this evening from Victoria Holland, who is a joint member of South Carolina SCNATS, as well as Illinois, the Chicago chapter. And she is a College of Examiners and Voice Specialist for the Royal Conservatory RCM certificate program. And she just wanted to add that her experience with young singers who excel and sing with confidence, who have had lessons, they sing with confidence and have well-developed storytelling, presentation, musicianship skills, secure intonation, a foundational understanding of breath control, and a performing level appropriate repertoire. Going to Loretta's point earlier, there's so many resources out there for young singers. We dropped that PDF of resources in the chat, and I'll be sending that along. I'm sure if it's not on there, I'll go ahead and say the Royal Conservatory program, the voice program is quite good and goes into musicianship as well. But Victoria goes on to say adjudicator comments that focus on these kinds of elements are supportive and helpful to students and teachers. So. All right, are there any other questions or any parting thoughts? All right, well, we're going to move on to the socializing. I'm going to have my hot tea here and mixing a little bit with our membership and guests. I'm going to stop the live stream, but before I do, I'd like to thank our guests, Chelsea Knapp and Margaret Fontiveros, for a very informative session on children and youth and adjudicating this population of students. Our chapter thanks you very much for your service and for your time today. So thank you, and I will be stopping the live stream.